Welcome to the Triple S podcast. Today we'll be discussing the NBA playoffs, the play-in games that are about to happen tomorrow, and who I think will win the championship this year. Some play-in games have already happened, and there's still some to be played to see what the eighth seed is in both the East and the West. And the eighth seed in the East is going to be Chicago versus Miami. In the West, it's going to be Sacramento versus New Orleans. Let's talk about Chicago versus Miami first. Chicago got here by playing the Hawks in the 9th, 10th seed game. And I think that, the biggest story in that game and the biggest story of this whole season has been the emergence of Kobe White. He dropped 42 points against the Hawks in that game. Winning that game for them, it's his career high. And I think that is really why they're in this situation, because DeMar DeRozan, he's been playing fine. He's averaging 24 points a game, but he's no longer star DeMar DeRozan like he was when he used to play for the Spurs or the Raptors. So the emergence of Kobe White for them was so important, especially because Zach LaVine got injured this season, had a foot injury, and he was their second leading scorer. So it was obviously important for somebody else to show up. Also, Vucevic there. And, this is a team that I don't think, if they win this game versus Miami, they're definitely not going to make it past the Celtics. I'd predict the 4-0 sweep. But it's impressive that they even got to this situation, considering their lack of star power and, sort of the malaise that was around that franchise. Maybe hoping for a good draft pick or whatnot. Obviously, Lonzo Ball hasn't been Lonzo Ball for them when they thought that they were gonna get. So I think for them to have this season has been great for them, regardless of whether they win this game or not. I view their season as a win. Now that is opposed to Miami, who has 10 more wins than Chicago. Miami should definitely make the playoffs. I'm predicting them to beat Chicago here, and Miami could make some noise in the playoffs like they did last year. Remember that last year they made the finals as an 8 seed. They could easily do the same thing now. Obviously, they have to play the Celtics, not the Bucks this year. And I think that the Celtics are a really good 1 seed. But the Heat could definitely make some noise. The idea of Jimmy Butler and the way that he is in the playoffs, and simply the roster that they have surrounding him. Tyler Hero, Bam Adebayo. This is a really good team, a really well-rounded team, and I don't think that they lost too much from last year's team. They switched out Kyle Lowry for Terry Rozier. I really like that move, gives them another scorer for the playoffs. And so, I'm not going to go as far as to say that I definitely think that the Heat are going to beat the Celtics in the first round, but don't be surprised if this is another team that, like last year, came from an 8 seed, came from the playoff tourney, and made some real noise, almost beat, the Nuggets last year. And this team is just so different in the playoffs, especially Jimmy Butler. I mean, you see how he turns it on right now. He's averaging 21 points per game. But Jimmy Butler, he's just a different animal in the playoffs. But here's the issue. We don't know how long he's going to be out for. In the game against the 76ers, which they lost, this is the reason they're in this game. He got injured. I think it was an MCL or something like that. And so we don't know how long he's going to be out for. I don't know at this time. If he makes it back, I think that they could easily beat the Celtics. If they don't, it's going to be really tough for them. But even if they don't have Jimmy Butler, I would not count this team out. Bam Adebayo is great. Tyler Hero is great. Terry Rozier is great. This team has some real scorers and some real playmakers on here. I mean, you just, all the way down to Caleb Martin, all the way down to, people like Jaime Haskins, who, as a rookie this year, as a late round draft pick, they were able to pick up. I think that's, so huge for them. They have real great depth. It's, just sucks that he's out because obviously that matchup between the Celtics and the Heat in the first round would be great. And, I don't want to say it's a foregone conclusion that they're going to beat Chicago here right now, but I really think that they will. That's my prediction for that game. Out here in the West, it's going to be Sacramento versus New Orleans. Sacramento got to this place by beating the Warriors in their play-in game. And, obviously that's a different story about the Warriors. I just want to say a little bit about that. And, this is really the end of their dynasty. You know, I know you could say it happened earlier with those bad seasons they had, but that was mostly due to injury. This team is just really wasn't good. They were being carried by Steph Curry. Obviously, Klay Thompson, the way he played in this game, but really the way he played all season. It's not the same Klay Thompson, Draymond Green with his issues. This team is not the same team it was obviously in 2015. It's not even the same team that they were 2 years ago when they won that championship that nobody expected them to win. So this is really the end of an era. Obviously, Stephen Curry is going to continue to be great, but I think they might have to blow it up after this season. But going to Sacramento, who's not going to play the Pelicans in this one, Sacramento, they lost to the Warriors in the season series last year. That was their first time making the playoffs in a really long time. And I don't doubt that they can make the playoffs again. They have some really good scores, and even more importantly, they have that really good balance of a good point guard who's a good playmaker, De'Aaron Fox, and a great power forward, center, whatever you want to categorize him, in Domantas Sabonis. He's leading them in assists right now. He has 8 assists per game, 14 rebounds. I mean, he's just exploded this season. And, regardless of whether you think that they're going to make it far in the playoffs, I think they can definitely beat New Orleans here. New Orleans has looked good, though, and they have a better record. This game is at home. They did lose to the Lakers to be in this spot. Obviously that was, a Lakers team that really showed out for that game. LeBron with 23. But here's the story with that game that I think might translate to this one. Zion Williamson had 40 points. And, he's played really well this year. He's made a great comeback this year from what I thought he was going to be. However, he is going through an injury that he sustained in last night's game, so we'll see if he's back. And if he's not back, I think this team completely falls apart. I don't think they have a supporting cast in contrast to a team like the Heat. Obviously Brandon Ingram and CJ McCollum are great scorers, but I don't think that they can take a game over in the same way as Zion can, and especially compared to the Kings that have really that 1-2 punch of Fox and Sabonis. I don't see the same thing in McCollum and Ingram. I think they're both great players, but I don't see them winning this game. I'm going to have the Kings moving on, playing the Oklahoma City Thunder in that 1-8 matchup. And speaking of matchups, I just want to look at the whole playoff tourney here and give my predictions for, the first round. I think here, first in the Eastern Conference, which I'm going to have Boston versus Miami here. I think Miami's going to advance. I'm going to quickly pick Boston. I don't think it's going to be a short series, but I think, as I mentioned earlier, without playoff Jimmy Butler, this team is lacking in some areas. I still think they're going to give Boston a really good challenge. So I'd give Boston in maybe 6. Moving on to the New York Knicks versus Philadelphia 76ers, a 2 versus the 7 seed here. The New York Knicks have just looked great this year, and Jalen Brunson is looking like an all-NBA type of player. The Philadelphia 76ers, you don't want to see them having to play in the playoff tournament. They certainly don't want to see it. I think that this is a good team, both good teams here, but I just see the New York Knicks moving on in 5. I don't think that the Philadelphia 76ers have it here. Joel Embiid is a great individual player, but I don't think he can make it far in the playoffs. Not just that I don't think. We've seen it time and time again. He can't make it past the second round. I don't think he's getting it past the first round here because they don't have that luxury of the extra home games of that higher seed. And speaking of higher seeds, I think that the Indiana Pacers have a great shot at taking down the Milwaukee Bucks. Without Giannis, or maybe with an injured Giannis, Milwaukee has looked awful since they picked up Doc Rivers. I don't know why they picked him up. He's proved that he's not a good coach. So I think that Indiana has this in 5 or 6. I'm going to give them 6. I'm going to give Bucks the benefit of the doubt. But Indiana looks really good this year with Tyrese Halliburton, another All-NBA type of guy, another guy that can be one of the stars of the league in just 2 or 3 years. And this 4 versus 5 matchup, I think obviously this is the hardest one to predict. I'm going to have the Cleveland Cavaliers moving, and it could be 6 or 7 games. I just think that the star power of Donovan Mitchell and then that point guard, that playmaking of Darius Garland, I think this team just meshes great. And, this is a great season for Orlando, whichever way you put it. I think that, even if they don't move on from the first round, they should be very proud of this season, especially considering where they were just a short couple years ago. Now, moving on to the Western Conference, as I said, I think it's going to be Oklahoma City versus Sacramento. And I think the Oklahoma City Thunder is going to move on easily here, 4 or 5 games. And, I heard talk about whether the Lakers should drop down, lose that play-in game so that way they had a chance to play the Oklahoma City Thunder instead of Denver Nuggets. I don't know where that argument is coming from because I think that Oklahoma City has a great team and has a team that is capable of winning it all this year. Behind Shea, again, another guy that's going to be the face of the league in a couple years. I mean, look, he averaged 30 points this season, with 6.2 assists, 2 steals. Those are all team leaders. He's going to obviously have to show out in this game, but I don't doubt that he can. And moving on to the 2 versus 7 seed, it is going to be the Denver Nuggets versus the Los Angeles Lakers because the Lakers did end up winning that play-in game. And, you have to pick the better team here. You have to pick the better talent right now. Jokic is just going to be unstoppable until proven otherwise. And so I have the Nuggets moving on. Next matchup is the Minnesota Timberwolves versus the Phoenix Suns. This is a series that I think is going to be pretty close. If you look at the Timberwolves, they have some good players. Obviously, they had a great season this year, were the 1 seeds for a lot of it, but have sort of fallen off a little bit, I'd say. Karl Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards are a great duo, and I think that it'll be enough to move them on to the next round. If going to that 4 versus 5 seed, it's going to be the Los Angeles Clippers versus the Dallas Mavericks. The Clippers have, been able to bounce back from a lot of the injuries that they had in years past, from a lot of the sitting of games from Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. And a move that I was skeptical about at the beginning of the season, then bringing in James Harden, has totally worked out. And, this team just meshes that they're going to move on to the next round. And I know that's a clean draw, all the lower seeds moving on. And I think it will get a little bit crazier in the second round. But these teams, they're in that position for a reason, and especially the Clippers. This is a team made for winning playoff basketball. They have 3 bona fide stars on the team that all mesh really well. It's hard to even notice somebody like Russell Westbrook in that mix there because, he's not one of their leading scorers or anything. But remember, this is a guy that can lead his own team. Obviously, he hasn't done it in a couple of years. But if he needs to show up for a playoff game, I don't doubt that he can. Obviously, you have to look at the amazing momentum that Dallas has had this season. And, they've gone 20-7 in their last 27 games. Luka Doncic has been showing out. But I don't think they have the cohesiveness necessary.
That's all for me right now. I'm obviously going to be excited to see the playoffs later on and to see if my picks worked out. And we'll probably cover it next time after the playoffs have ended.